Let's talk about newsletters and specifically formats that are effective for newsletters and why formats just are important anyway. So the idea here is that some news organizations definitely use like a string of headlines or an RSS feed of headlines in their newsletter. Is that a good idea or a bad idea? And if it's not really maybe the best practice, what are the best practices when we think about kind of like writing newsletters and how to like make them as engaging as possible for our audience?
Yeah, I am surprised how many newsletters I receive hundreds of newsletters from across the country from local news organizations. I'm sure you do too.
Yeah.
And we look at them and I still see a lot of RSS driven newsletters or just headline regurgitation of the link. No buttons, even for anything to like tell someone to click off, like a nice red read more button or a green click here to find out what happened next, something like that. Um, and some of it is due to newsroom staff time, right? And we can definitely walk newsrooms through how to carve out time for that. But the thing that I would say that's most important for your newsletter audience is that is the most your newsletter audience is likely your most valuable audience for a couple of reasons. One, they're giving you a piece of first party data or zero party data, as folks are starting to talk about in the industry, or likely to give zero party data after they give that newsletter. Um, they're giving you their email, so they're entering a relationship with you. So sending them a list of headlines isn't very personal. But if you're taking the time to have your local reporter who's actually at the council meeting, have your education reporter talk about in the intro, what they were working on, or here's a meeting I was at last night, or if your sports reporter is teasing out the athlete of the week and the great interview that you did, with a high school athlete, that just shows again to your most valuable audience that you're out in the community doing that work. So we work with newsrooms a lot on creating more personalized newsletters, and that is really something like having an intro, 2 to 3 paragraphs talking about the news of the day, probably a headshot of the reporter, and a little sign off byline like, thanks for reading so and so, reporter title, listing, and then boom, here's what's happening next. Sometimes it'll preview what's in the newsletter so folks know. Sometimes it'll be a interesting tidbit of information. And what we find is reporters really like this different style of writing when we give them the opportunity. David, I'm thinking of that example in with a recent client where we shared different types of intros in the newsletter and different themes to choose from, and it was kind of like a menu of ways you could introduce your newsletter, and it really helped. I think reporters and editors think differently about writing. I don't know what has been your experience training on this.
Yeah, I think having like a lot of creativity, and I think you sort of need like the Axios style like has like a style for it and like a format to it. That format's really great. And but what I like about that model and how I see some media companies like kind of taking that model and doing their own thing with it is that they're letting the content sort of like drive the format or the breakout in terms of what's going to be most useful for people. I think that's like the big change for me is that opposed to like looking at the newsletter as just like that traffic driver, it's like, can we hold attention in it and can we actually build loyalty in it? And one of the ways that we do that, we make people want to open and read it every time because we're actually giving them so much value, with inside that where like we're able to like summarize it and not summarizing it like in a, do we have like the first 3 paragraphs from the story, but like we're thinking about like how would somebody in 100 words get a lot of value out of this, and sometimes the first 4 paragraphs is not they're not going to learn everything that they probably need to walk away with, and that's why the bullets like the by the numbers and the what's next and those sort of like things are so why it matters, like that's why that is so important. And Axios does have like this smart brevity book. It's an awesome book, and what I love about it is like they talk about how the tightness is so important, and like newsletters don't necessarily have to go on and on and on. They can have a lot of bullets, but you really have to like write them tight and get as much information, the right information in each of those areas. And so I think those are really good lessons for like all of us when we've written that email, written that email that's too long. Could that be tighter? But when we're thinking about newsletters, how to make that information as concise as possible, not watering it down at all, but telling somebody what they really need to know. I think that's the point that we really try to kind of get across.
Yeah, and something else to keep in mind, particularly with that short smart brevity format, if a newsroom is looking at their analytics for newsletters, they're likely to see either half or more than half of their audience coming from mobile, right? So you're even looking at a smaller view on the phone, which lends itself well to those bullets, the headlines, the what's next, the here's what you need to know.
Yeah, absolutely.